Hey guys, welcome back to Lit Sports Online. We're here to talk about MMA in general. Not so much just UFC this time, thankfully, I guess. So let's start off with a little bit from last weekend at UFC Fight Night Argentina. We had a couple exciting fights, a couple guys that I think will be contending for the title soon. We had Santiago Ponzinibbio defeating Neil Magny, which is a real exciting fight, I thought, because it's two guys who are kind of always at around the top 10, or Neil Magny is at least always around the top 10, and Santiago Ponzinibbio recently finds himself there after beating Mike Perry last time out, and it was an exciting fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio just leg kicked the absolute hell out of Neil Magny.
Yeah.
It's always fun to see a guy a couple minutes into the fight who is having trouble standing on one leg.
Yeah, I mean, again, the old saying, you have about as much chance as a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. So,
yeah,
if your legs aren't working, you're shit out of luck, bro.
Yeah, pretty much. I never drew that correlation before. I don't know how, but I guess you're more clever than I.
Kind of brings me back to that Anderson Silva fight where his leg wrapped around the other guy's like, fuck, never mind, he's done.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Gotta plug that one.
And Ray Longo specifically trained Chris Weidman to do that block where he, instead of just picking your leg up and taking it on the side of your shin, you specifically point the knee into the shin bone. And it is brutal. I had a brother of mine do that one night when we were drunk. He kicked me, and I tried to kick him back, and he put his knee right into my shin bone. That shit hurt for like a week and a half. Thank you, Mark. But Ponzinibbio just lower calf kicked the hell out of Neil Magny, which is something that we have recently seen in MMA that we didn't see a lot before, and we don't even see a lot in like Muay Thai and professional Muay Thai fights. The lower calf kick where they're hitting that bottom segment of the leg instead of like the thigh, and it's becoming increasingly popular because it's increasingly efficient. You can take far less hits on that lower on that part of your leg.
Exactly. I mean, you got to think the brunt of your thigh, that's a big muscle, whereas the calf is very exposed. You start tearing down the bottom part of your leg, the rest is just going to crumble.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense that they're targeting that. Like I said, I think it's genius, honestly.
Yeah, and you're gonna hit the you're gonna hit bone on bone more often too, and the person throwing the kick, the bone is gonna be much more prepared for that impact when you're at the front of the blade. Like the shin bone kind of feels like you can feel the point on the front of it, but when you're taking that impact on the side of your shin, man, it is just not fun. And so Ponzinibbio just kind of dominated the fight. He caught him early in the fight, hurt Magny's eye. He threw a bunch of leg kicks and finished him in, I think, the fourth round. And like I said, it's a fun fight to see where both guys are going to end up. I think Ponzinibbio is well on his way to being at the top of the division. I think they should put him up against somebody in the top 5 next, and I think he's one fight away from a title shot, maybe 2 tops. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from here.
Definitely.
The next fight I wanted to mention from last weekend is just, I like seeing guys that I've been watching for a long time, who've had ups and downs in their careers, and I gotta say Ricardo Lamas looked pretty good last weekend. He finished the fight with ground and pound, and it's just always good to see a guy kind of on the rebound. And he's one of those dudes again who's always in the top 10. Like he never drops very far. He is always, any night could be his night against a top tier contender, and so to see him get another win is just makes me feel good, you know.
And the steady resurgence continues. I mean, the future's bright.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, hopefully he can get himself back into a title shot. He was up for a title shot recently, and he was up for a number 1 contenders fight. He was going to get his rematch against Jose Aldo, who he fought for the title a couple years ago.
Wow.
And Jose Aldo got injured. He took a short notice fight against somebody, I can't remember who it was, and he lost the fight. So it's one of those risk-reward things. Yeah. But after taking such a big risk and experiencing such a loss, it's good to see him on the rebound and working his way back towards the top.
It's always good to see that type of thing. And like I was saying, I think if he can stay consistent, stay healthy, he'll get back in that title shot, and he should have another shot probably within the next year. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. If he can stay healthy and get another 1-2 fights and look as good as he did today, I think that he can definitely work his way back pretty soon.
Yeah.
So let's move on to this coming weekend. We have
this weekend.
We have a couple exciting things happening. We have a UFC card in Beijing.
Have they ever been in China?
A couple times, not a lot. So it's
not
always
a lot of sports go to China, so it's pretty cool when I hear that.
Yeah, well, the UFC is trying to get a foothold in the Asian market, particularly like they're trying to compete with ONE FC and Rizin. So Rizin is the Japanese MMA organization that Demetrius Johnson recently got traded to. ONE FC, I think, is based out of Shanghai. So there's a couple big MMA organizations over there. They're trying to compete. And UFC, even before those organizations got as big as they are now, the UFC had been trying to build up a market there so that they could start to farm some talent from there. Yeah. And I've always been excited to see Chinese MMA fighters come into the UFC because they weren't as common. And so it was always fun to see those guys come in and see how they do, particularly because they have a different base a lot of the time than a lot of your typical MMA fighters where they're, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai based. You see some guys come over from Sanchu, which is kung fu, traditional Chinese kickboxing. So it's a slightly different style. The biggest practitioner we've ever seen in MMA from that is Kung Lee, who's now doing movies. He's in all sorts of action movies. He was in the movie directed by the RZA.
Okay. Yeah. I can't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about.
Iron Fist.
Yes.
He's in Iron Fist. It was great. And he shows up in action movies every once in a while, so he's fun to see. And he was a phenomenal fighter when he was in Strikeforce. He kicked Frank Shamrock's arm so hard he broke it to win the title. Then he came over to the UFC towards the end of his career, lost a couple fights, won a couple fights, but he's still a fun guy to watch, and it's interesting to see the different style. So, on that card, we have a couple exciting heavyweight fights. We have a newcomer to the UFC. In his first fight, a guy named Sergey Pavlovich. Sorry, I didn't remember that name. So, don't know much about this guy, but I do know he's an undefeated heavyweight from Russia with 9 knockouts in his 12 wins.
Jesus.
So, based on the other heavyweights that we've seen from Russia, and the other styles we've seen from Russia, we see an Alexei Oleinik, who is a grappling wizard. We see your Alexander Volkov, who is a kickboxing wizard. You have to look at it and say, okay, he has 9 knockouts, but he can't be bad in anywhere the fight goes. He's going to be able to hold his own no matter what happens.
100%.
And the fact that they're giving him Alistair Overeem in his first fight in the UFC, a legend of kickboxing and multiple MMA organizations, tells you a lot about the hype and the potential behind this guy.
Yeah, I mean, you have a guy that had 9 knockouts.
So it's not that far-fetched to imagine that he could jump into near the top level of the UFC, and we're going to see how he fares.
I think that's exciting.
And they're putting him up against Alistair Overeem, who's, like I said, is the most credentialed striker in UFC heavyweight history. And not only that, but he's the favorite. Yeah. Overeem's the underdog here, which is crazy to me, and also makes me want to put a little bit of money on him. Hey. But Overeem's very seasoned. This is his 62nd professional MMA fight, I think officially. If you ask him, he'll say it's closer to 70 maybe more. But he's also been knocked out a ton. Yeah. He's very chinny, hasn't been able to hold up so well against punishment on the feet these days. So going in against an undefeated fighter, much younger, we don't know much about him, who has 9 knockouts. You look at that and it doesn't look so good.
So this probably is not what some would probably say a trial by fire. This is not trial by fire. This is just, hey, welcome to the club here. Whoop this guy's ass.
I mean, on one hand, yes. On one hand, no. It really, for me, it depends on which Overeem shows up. Okay. Because Overeem, if he comes in aggressive, has a tendency to get caught with things he shouldn't. Which is what we saw when he fought Francis Ngannou. It was a #1 contender fight. Overeem is again one of those guys who's never far from the top of the division, even if it's just based on how good his reputation is. And so giving him Overeem is kind of a toss-up. You can look at it and you can say, we could get the Overeem that looks unbeatable and looks like he could take on the world, or we could get the Overeem that showed up against Francis Ngannou, has a bad game plan, and gets caught with a punch that knocks him into orbit. Yeah. So it could potentially be I think it's going to go very badly for one of those two guys. Overeem has the potential to knock anyone out.
Yeah.
You know, ask Andre Arlovsky, ask Junior Dos Santos, ask Mark Hunt. The list goes on. But we're going to find out.
We're going to find out
what this new guy has.
I'm curious to see what he can do,
offer.
honestly. I'm actually hyped for this match, so.
Yeah, me too.
This fight's going to be legit.
So speaking of Overeem's former opponents, 2 of them are fighting in the main event. Both of which finished him in, I think, the first round.
Jesus.
I think Curtis Blades might have been the second round, but we have Curtis Blades versus Francis Ngannou, which is a very exciting fight to me because, first off, it's a rematch. Francis Ngannou was Curtis Blades' only loss in the UFC, and it was actually due to a doctor's stoppage due to a cut.
Oh, wow.
It was in a bad spot. He was bleeding a lot, couldn't see well. End of the fight. They're not going to let him take a ton of damage, keep getting hit in that same spot, and be potentially very, very serious.
It's not good for anybody.
No. So, Curtis Blades versus Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou's last couple outings have been a little disappointing from how much hype he had before them. Mm-hmm. So he coming in was just starching people. He's a freak of nature as far as like his size and speed and the way he can move on his feet and his striking goes. And so we saw him put people away in terrifying fashion. He punched Alistair Overeem so hard that I wasn't sure the skin was going to stay intact from his chin to his chest. He got into a fight into the title shot from that fight with Stipe Miocic, who just exploited the weakness that we all suspected Ngannou would have, which is his ground game. So Stipe was able to strike, get inside the range, take him down, and control him for most of the fight. After that, we saw Ngannou fight Derek Lewis, and it was the most boring fight that has ever been fought in the history of fighting. Oh, it was terrible. It was
even more boring than Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, because that shit was the most dull fucking thing I've ever seen.
Yes, it was way more boring than that. It was brutal. Jeez. It was, I think, 20 total strikes thrown over like a 25-minute fight. I think it was a 25-minute fight. I think it was a main event. No, it was a 3-round fight, but yeah, it was terrible. Derek Lewis comes out. He said, my back was hurting me again. I was having back issues like 2 days before the fight, but I didn't want to pull out. So, whatever. It was terrible. Ngannou lost. So that's 2 losses in a row after he came into the UFC and went on a terrifying spree of destroying people. And so then we see him go up against Curtis Blades, whose only loss is to Francis Ngannou, and is coming off of a finish of the aforementioned Alistair Overeem, where he made Overeem look silly. He's a JUCO national wrestling champion, and so my thoughts going into this is that it's going to look similar to the Stipe Miocic Ngannou fight. You have a guy who I don't think that Curtis Blades is as good at striking as Stipe is, but his wrestling is up there with the best of them. Yeah. He's not a Division I national champ, but the JUCO wrestling guys are just as good.
Yeah, and I relate to wrestlers because I did wrestling throughout high school, so, you know, when I see a good wrestler, like, I get really excited because that's what I know.
Yeah, and so for me, I have to look at this and wonder why they made this fight, because you're looking at Francis Ngannou who went into the Stipe fight with like the biggest ego you could possibly have. Dana White was criticizing him on how big his ego was after the fight and saying that his ego was so big that he didn't take the fight seriously. He didn't think he had to train wrestling. He thought he would just be able to stand up and knock the guy out. And then after that Stipe fight, after Stipe demolished him, we come out and we see Francis Ngannou just as gun-shy as we've ever seen anyone against Derek Lewis. So you have to look at that and say, okay, his head is not in a good spot. He is not actually where he needs to be mentally to be fighting these guys at the top level. And then you're going to give him a matchup that's just as bad as him versus Stipe.
Yeah.
So the question is, why do you make this fight, right? So it's did Ngannou convince them hey, I'm ready. I want to take this bad match up because I want to prove myself.
Yeah.
Or is it just Curtis Blades saying, I want to get that loss back. I don't think I would have lost. I don't think I should have lost. I want to get it back. I think, personally, that they're giving this fight to Curtis Blades to get that loss back, to prove himself against Francis Ngannou, and then to just give Curtis Blades a fight while they figure out what the heavyweight title picture is going to look like. Because right now, we have your Daniel Cormier holding the title, who just fought, just beat Derek Lewis, but we don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to fight Brock Lesnar? Is he going to fight John Jones? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, well, Brock Lesnar, you just never know because, like I said, he's in I do the wrestling videos, so primarily what I talk about usually is wrestling. And with the Brock Lesnar thing is weird because if you do watch wrestling, you kind of see that he doesn't look like he's going anywhere. But at the end of the day, Brock Lesnar does what Brock Lesnar wants.
Yeah.
So if he wants to take, and let's be honest here, this toy title to the UFC and, go up against the big guys. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive, dude. I used to wrestle. I was a high school wrestler. I'm not naive. WWE is entertainment. UFC is it's about that life. So I am curious to see what happens with that, honestly. So you bringing it up actually got me excited because if Brock Lesnar goes from wrestling, which honestly is more scripted than half a Degrassi episode. Yes, I'm blasting wrestling. Sorry, Mike Thompson. Is he going to be physically ready to handle that? That's what I'm wondering, and that's what I'm getting at. It's what's the point of even leaving WWE? You're cushioned. It's easy for you. You don't have to do much. But you go to UFC, you actually have to fight. Legitimately fight.
Yeah, that's true. And like I said in our last episode, him coming over into the UFC and fighting Daniel Cormier.
I think honestly, can I say something? To me, him just coming into UFC from WWE, and don't get me wrong, he was an amazing amateur wrestler. NCAA titles. Yes, he was a great wrestler in college. And he was a good fighter in the UFC in his run there. But just coming out of WWE just randomly and getting a title shot, that's bullshit to me. I get the money, the company making money behind it, but just throwing him into Cormier, I don't get that.
I get it because we're now in the Conor McGregor era of the UFC. Yeah. We're in the pay-per-view era. We're in the entertainment era, as Brendan Schaub likes to say. And so I understand why he goes into the title shot. The Conor McGregor era. He started this whole thing almost.
The original superstar.
Yeah, I guess. Well, really, that's Ronda Rousey.
Ronda Rousey, yeah.
Really
now she's in wrestling.
Ronda Rousey is the one who started all of this, and Conor McGregor just took it to a level that she couldn't have imagined. And Brock Lesnar's coming back. He's the biggest pay-per-view sell outside of those two names I just mentioned. And so him walking right back into a title shot is understandable, particularly when you look at what he's accomplished in his MMA career.
Yes.
He basically does this as a hobby when he gets bored and wants another paycheck.
And that's insane to me that you can just bounce in and out. What?
Like I said last time,
that's insane.
He's a freak of nature,
he is.
Dude. If we lived in a different century, he would be a Viking king, and there's nothing anybody could do about it. And so he just walks in whenever he wants and beats top tier guys, which is also why it's almost justifiable that he's in the position he's in. Mm-hmm. He came into the UFC. He won a title by beating one of the greatest fighters of all time, Randy Couture, one of the only 4 people to win titles in 2 different weight classes. Then he beat Shane Carwin. He beat Frank Mir, lost to Cain Velasquez, lost to Alistair Overeem, and came back. And then he beat Mark Hunt, who I
remember that.
So fight. It's not that he has a bad MMA resume.
And I'm not taking away from it. I would never take away from it. Like you said, he is a freak of nature, a genetic anomaly. It's just one of those things where it's he's barely on WWE television as their champion. Yeah. So for him to just I'm barely here. I'm just going to come, do what I want. But again, I get it. Entertainment era. It is a good match. It is good fighting when he is there. But it's just one of those things where it's if I'm a guy that's sitting in the UFC locker room, barely making, probably not even six figures or whatever. I don't know how much they make. But they're not making what the John Cena's and the Rocks and those WWE wrestlers make. So, if, this $1 million man comes in and just takes my opportunity, I'm going to be a little pissed.
Yeah, rightfully so. And I tend to lean more towards the side of, how dare he?
Yes.
You know what I mean? I personally, because I'm not a wrestling fan, I am an MMA fan. So, like I said, I can't deny his accomplishments and how crazy they are for how little time he puts into MMA and how little experience he does. It is absurd that he's accomplished what he has accomplished. And if you look at his record isn't stellar, but then you have to look at the names on his record and you have to go, oh, that's understandable. Because he only fights the best, which is nuts. That being said, I think it's bad news bears for Brock Lesnar fighting Daniel Cormier.
Yeah.
Like, you can be as good of an amateur wrestler as you want to be, and you can be as genetic of a freak as you want to be and as big as you want to be, but when you go in there and you face an Olympian who has been doing nothing but wrestling since he was a child, you're in for a bad night. Especially when that guy's main training partner is the man who put the worst beating on you've experienced in your career in Cain Velasquez. Everything, like I said, everything for me points towards Daniel Cormier winning that fight.
I'm excited to watch it, though, buddy.
That being said,
I'm excited to watch it.
Me too. That being said, let's wrap it back around to what we were originally talking about. Curtis Blaydes. I think that this is all set up so that Curtis Blaydes can wipe that blemish off his record against Francis Ngannou, and I would love to see Curtis Blaydes versus Daniel Cormier. I don't think we're going to get it. I think Daniel Cormier is going to fight. If he has more than one fight, he's said he's only going to have one more fight because he wants to retire before he's 40 in March. If he has more than one fight, it's only going to be big money fights. I think it'll be Brock Lesnar and John Jones, and those are about the only two fights I'll take. But I would love to see a Curtis Blaydes versus Daniel Cormier fight. Yeah. As much as I think Daniel Cormier is rightfully going to be a big betting favorite there, it would still be a fun fight. But
what are you
I would also say I would like to see how John Jones goes in the heavyweight division.
Yeah.
I would also say that if Daniel Cormier vacates, John Jones doesn't go up to heavyweight, I would like to see Curtis Blaydes, Stipe Miocic for the vacant heavyweight title. All sorts of possibilities. So, let's move on to our last fight of this video.
Probably the craziest.
Yeah. This is where it's going to get real weird.
We're in the Twilight Zone now.
Yeah, something. We're going to jump back a decade.
Back to when I was in college and watching UFC on the reg.
And we're actually going to have to talk about Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz 3 this weekend on pay-per-view, put on by Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions.
Oh, wow. My
first question is, what is going on?
I don't know. The last time I saw Chuck Liddell, he was on Celebrity Big Brother and not even winning that. So.
Last time I saw Chuck Liddell, he was on a vision quest with Steve-O from Jackass, choking him out in the Swedish Alps or something. It's
what?
I don't
like.
I don't know what to make of it.
I don't even know if I want to see. It's gonna be what?
I'm gonna find it somehow. Probably after the fact.
Of course, that's the only way to watch this.
And you can buy it on pay-per-view. I think it was $50, and then
nobody
was pre-ordering it.
Screw that.
Yeah, it was $49.99. Nobody was pre-ordering it. They dropped it to $39.99, but they have a Black Friday deal for $19.99 or something. So if you order it on Friday for Saturday, it's $20.
All right.
I might do that. I might
$20.
We'll see. But I don't Tito Ortiz never stopped fighting.
Yeah.
He had a huge slump for a while, but he's been active this whole time. Chuck Liddell has not fought in 8 years. Last time we saw him fight, he was getting knocked out cold by a Rich Franklin who only had one arm.
Wow.
Rich Franklin is now an executive for ONE FC.
Yeah.
Chuck Liddell, and I get it. He's in recent interviews he's been talking about how he felt forced out of his career. He wasn't ready to retire. He wanted to keep fighting.
But why wait 8 years? Me not wanting to retire is me coming back in a year or two. Yeah. After maybe some time, I'll get my head right, working out. Not 8 years where he's virtually been everywhere but the octagon. Like, literally everywhere. Every reality show. Everywhere but. It doesn't make sense.
He's 48 years old.
Jesus.
And it's...
What?
I get it that he didn't have the closure that he wanted to on his career, and no one should be able to tell him when to retire except for himself. That being said, one of his best friends and his former manager is Dana White, the president of the UFC, and Dana White was the one who kind of said, Chuck, as your friend for 20 years, I would not like to see you fight in the UFC anymore, and I can't in good conscience put you in there against the top level guys anymore.
No, they would kill him. They would literally kill him.
Yeah, it's not good for his health, and so I get it. That being said, it's still kind of fun because it's the grudge match. Yeah. They were friends, then they hated each other. There were 2 fights before. Chuck Liddell knocked Tito Ortiz out twice, so Tito's always kind of just been pissy towards Chuck, rightfully so, I guess. But I still don't know what to make of the fight.
No, I don't know what to think. I mean, like I said, for the fact that names, Tito Ortiz, these are big names from when I was younger. And now it's like, but it's like, they were younger. I was younger. Now I'm old. They're older.
Yes.
What?
I didn't think I would ever have to talk about, when I started doing these videos, I didn't think I would ever have to break down a fight from either of these gentlemen.
No.
That being said, let's give it a little bit of a breakdown real quick before we call this quits, just because we have to for merit's sake. I think Tito takes it. I think Chuck's very old.
I think Tito takes it too, and I think it's going to be a heartwarming end. Like, it's going to be really oh man, great career, hugging it out.
Yeah, we'll see. Because Tito's also said, he's like, I'm retired. I'm only doing this because I want to fight Chuck Liddell. And Chuck Liddell is not saying that. Chuck Liddell is saying, I might come back and keep fighting. It's like, what? But also, I think, based on the videos we've seen, Chuck is saying all the videos that they put out have just been warm-up videos, and he's questioning why those are the specific videos that Golden Boy... He's like, of all the stuff that they recorded, why would they put out my warm-up video of me, right after I stretch, just throwing slow stuff to get my body, ready? And so Chuck he's 48 years old. And he is ancient in MMA years. So I can't imagine that he is in as good a shape, as quick, as sharp as he used to be.
Yeah.
He still probably hits like a truck. He's Chuck Liddell. That's what he's known for. But I can't imagine he's as good as he used to be. And Tito Ortiz has remained active. And not only that, but the big leg up that Chuck had on him earlier in their careers was their stand-up, particularly the boxing. And Tito has been training for a few years now, a long time, with one of the best and most underrated boxing and striking coaches in MMA, Jason Perillo, who is also he was the coach who got Michael Bisping the champion. Okay. He's the coach who got BJ Penn his original championship. He's the coach who trains Chris Cyborg currently. And he's a phenomenal striking coach. So I think that Tito's stand-up is going to be way better than it used to be. I think that Chuck, his deterioration is going to be enough that the gap will have closed enough. I have a feeling this is going to be a bad night for Chuck. And despite what he's saying about the fact that he might keep fighting after this.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, he's 48.
There's no way.
He's sitting here saying, I want to fight more people. I might join Bellator. I don't think he's going to. I think it's going to be a bad night. I think it's a bad idea. Tito is already saying, I'm retired. I'm only doing this because I want to fight Chuck.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I think Tito's going to take it, and I think both these dudes should walk off into the sunset after this. Having transcended MMA, they're both huge figures. They're legends of the sport. They were pioneers
of it,
yeah. They're legends of the sport. Yeah. Chuck Liddell has been so successful in this sport that he has transcended it, and now he's on reality shows and doing whatever the hell he wants.
Win,
he's in videos for car batteries where he punches rhinos. Like
who the hell does that?
What else do you need from this sport, man?
Why is that a thing?
You were the highest champion you could be. You beat your rivals. Walk away.
Just go into the sunset.
Yeah, both of you. Please. For Christ's sake. just go into the sunset after this fight.
But that'll do it for our episode. We got a lot of good fights coming this week, as you can tell. Thank you for tuning in. Another shameless plug. This is LitTube.com. It is a thing now. Link is going to be down below in the information. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're everywhere. Plus, premiering a brand new show next week. Hopefully everything works out for it. Where we're going to be actually talking Baltimore sports. It's a big, it's our gift to Baltimore, our home. So I'm excited for it. Jordan is great, your brother.
Yeah.
Jordan's a great guy. He brings a lot of information, being an actual beat writer for the Orioles and the Ravens. So, bit of professionalism here at YouTube. But yes, thank you and stay tuned. Take care.
All right.
I'm pretty sure Cage side is like
UFC
already
homosexuals
copyrighted.
rolling in 5, 4, 3.
I'm uncomfortable starting this video because Alex called me gay a second ago, and it threw me off. So.
All right, I'm gonna count him back in. The talent has spoken. Take 2. UFC non-homosexual stuff. Rolling in 5.
Hey guys, welcome.